I dare you to read these 5 books without quitting your job. I don't think you can do it. But if you clicked on this video, you probably want to be convinced to quit your job. I know this because I was in that exact situation a year ago. 3 times a week I was Googling, should I quit my job? How long do I need to stay in consulting for it to count on my CV? Can you leave a job after just 6 months? Now, I was lucky enough to get fired before I could chicken out of leaving, but you may not be so lucky and need a little extra push. So today I'm going to share the main lessons I took from each book, plus how risky it is to read each one on a scale from 1 to 5 hot peppers, based on how well it convinces you to quit your job. Starting with the lowest risk book and then working our way up. First, we've got When, The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing by Daniel Pink. This book isn't just about quitting, but in general about knowing the right timing for literally anything. But it does have a dedicated section titled When to Quit a Job, a guide. So I had to include this book. The book gives you 5 questions to ask yourself to decide whether you should quit your job. And my favorite is the first question. Do you want to be in this job on your next work anniversary? Apparently, we're most likely to quit our job on our 1-year work anniversary. The second most likely time is on our 2-year work anniversary, and then the third most likely time, our 3-year work anniversary, which is a good reminder that it gets harder, not easier, to quit a job the longer we stay. And the more often we say, just 1 more year, the more likely we are to never leave, ever. This book is a start to get us thinking of the timing of decisions in a new way, but it's still pretty tame, so I'm going to give it a risk rating of 2 hot peppers. If this book was a dish in a Thai restaurant, my mouth would be burning a little bit and my eyes would be tearing up, but I could still hide it from my date and pretend that everything's fine. Yeah. Next up, we've got Quit. We're already starting strong with the title, The Power of Knowing When to Walk Away. It's written by professional poker player Annie Duke, who has a fascinating perspective on the topic of quitting, because to be successful in poker, what matters most is not just how much you win, but how quickly you cut your losses and walk away when the odds are against you. And that's true for life as well. People aren't successful and achieve their goals because they never quit anything, but because they stick with the right things and quit everything else. But because we only get to see what people stick with and not what they quit, we get this false idea that winners never quit. My favorite chapter of the book is called The Hardest Thing to Quit is Who You Are. It talks about how we have a desire to maintain internal consistency, which means that we want our past beliefs and actions to line up with our current beliefs and actions. And when new information conflicts with a belief, we can either change that belief, but that's hard. So we're much more likely to instead rationalize away the new information. So if we end up in a job we hate, it's difficult to come to terms with that because we made the decision to take that job and we don't want to have made a wrong decision. So we go through a lot of mental gymnastics to convince ourselves that this was still the right decision even though we're miserable at our job. And surprisingly, this behavior gets worse when we think others are observing our decision, because we don't just want to feel consistent internally, we also really care about looking consistent to others. So rather than making a rational decision based on the facts of the current situation, we get so overtaken by the desire to look consistent that we end up making irrational decisions. Rather than quickly quitting the job that turned out to be a misstep, we often escalate our commitment and go down that path even more aggressively. But I think knowing that this is how our mind works is a strong antidote to staying in a job we hate, which is why I'm giving this book a healthy risk rating of 3 hot peppers. With this book, there's no more hiding my low spice tolerance from my date. I'm shoving yogurt into my mouth to try and soothe the burn somehow, but it's not helping. Before we get to the extra spicy books, I'm excited to share with you my brand new newsletter called Unhinged Careers for high-achieving professionals who are done fulfilling other people's expectations and want to make career decisions that are actually right for them. You can join the party with a link in the description. Now on to the third book, The Dip, The Extraordinary Benefits of Knowing When to Quit and When to Stick by Seth Godin. This book is super short, less than 80 pages, so you can read it in about 2 hours. And I like to pick it up every time there's an important decision to make. I last used it a few weeks ago when I was deciding whether to quit the current business I was building, which I did end up quitting. And I wish I had read it at every single job I had so that I could make these decisions more quickly and confidently. The main idea of the book is that whenever you're faced with a decision of whether you should quit or stick, you're typically in one of two situations. And before you can make the right decision, you need to know which type of situation you're in. The first type is called the dip, and it can be described with a curve that looks like this, with effort on one axis and results on the other. The curve describes how everything we pursue starts out exciting and fun, but then it gets harder and less fun until we hit a low point, the dip. And only if we stick through this dip do we get to see the great success that lies on the other side of it. But there's a second type called the cul-de-sac, which is French for dead end. And this is a situation where you can work however much you want, you'll never get anywhere. If you're in this type of situation, you should quit as soon as possible so that you can instead pursue something that will actually get you places. And this made me think of a friend of mine who was waiting for a promotion. He knew the manager didn't really value him. The manager kept saying, yeah, maybe next time, and then the next promotion would come up and he would pick someone else every time. How likely do you think it is that he gets promoted the 5th time, the 9th time, and how much did waiting around actually set back his career? In a situation like this, things are not gonna get better with time and effort, so you want to get the hell out of there ASAP so you can find a job where sticking through the hard times is actually worth it. The book is a risky read if you're in a situation that's not worth staying in. It has made me quit things in the past, so I'm giving this a risk rating of 4 out of 5 hot peppers. At this point, I'm frantically running around the restaurant, stealing people's water glasses to try to calm down my mouth, which of course only makes things worse. One thing's for sure though, my date is never gonna forget this night. For book number 4, I have The Pathless Path, Imagining a New Story for Work and Life by Paul Millard. I first read this 2 years ago when I quit my job in engineering without a plan for what to do next, and it really helped me through that time. I also know of several people who read that book and then quit their jobs. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this book set a record in how many people have quit their job because of it, since it gets reviews like this one. Read your book and then quit my job the same day. Thanks and nice writing. So I hope you're wary and carefully deciding whether you dare to read this book. Now, the author Paul tells the story of how he left the traditional path to forge his own. From the outside, he was doing really well career-wise. He was working in strategy consulting at firms like McKinsey and later BCG, but he had what he calls a pebble in his shoe. Something was telling him that this wasn't right, that there should be more. And he ended up quitting his job, writing online, traveling, freelancing, and writing this book. I don't want to spoil more of the story. Highly recommend you give it a read if you dare. And I'm giving this a risk rating of 4.5 hot peppers, almost the highest possible given its track record. In fact, it's so spicy that I just risked my life. My date had to call an ambulance and now I'm on my way to the hospital. Not sure if I'm gonna make it. Really hope these story bits make sense to other people. There's only one book that might be even riskier to read, and that's 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Burkeman. This book is actually not about quitting at all, and yet I think it's a book that has made me most likely to quit things that aren't right. The title of the first chapter says it all. In the long run, we're all dead, which sounds like the book is kind of morbid and depressing, but it actually had the opposite effect on me. I found it incredibly inspiring, and I couldn't wait to make dramatic changes to my life after reading it. The main message is that life is so short that we can't do everything we want to do. In fact, compared with all the things we could choose to do, we hardly have time to do anything at all, because on average we only have 4,000 weeks. And because we can do so few things with our life, however we decide to spend that time really matters. So we might as well give up on trying to do it all and really deeply think about what's important to us and what we choose to do with our one precious life. I think if you truly surrender to the book, you cannot stay in a meaningless job. It just doesn't work, which is why this book has a risk rating of 5 hot peppers, and you better proceed with caution. Boom, I just spontaneously went up in flames in front of my date. Looks like the date is over. But oh, what's that? I'm rising from the ashes like a phoenix, and I'm holding something in my hands. It's my resignation letter. Now, if you read these books and decide it's time to quit your job and make a big change in your life, one thing that will probably still hold you back is not knowing what to do instead, which is why I made this video about what everyone gets wrong about changing careers, where I explain why it's a bad idea to wait around until you know what you want to do and what you can do instead of waiting around. Give it a watch so that not knowing doesn't keep you from building your best career.